Frank's Red Hot is the perfect blend of flavor and heat, so you can use an entire bottle to make recipes like buffalo chicken dip or buffalo nachos, or even things that don't start with buffalo. Frank's Red Hot, I put that on everything.
Hello?
Hey.
Are you ready?
Everybody, yeah, shuffle your feet, yeah. Everybody, move laterally to the right. Defense is back. All right.
Oh, that was fantastic.
Yeah, so defense is back on the Palouse. We'll get into that in a little bit. Welcome to Podcast versus Everyone. This is Craig Powers, joined, as always, by Jeff Nusser. How we doing, Jeff?
I'm fantastic, man. I still haven't gotten over my my Kyle Smith high, so I'm just like riding that wave all the way into this week's podcast.
Well, we got a re-up yesterday, or Monday.
I know,
so
it was like a little shot in the
another
arm.
Yeah, and every time nerds like us, we can just look on Ken Palm and all that stuff, and we can relive it over and over again. Read the articles, listen to the podcasts. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's get into our beers. Jeff, I heard you pop open a bottle earlier. What you drinking?
I did. Okay, so what I've got is a beer from one I know your favorite breweries, Modern Times. I believe we've talked about Modern Times before on the show.
Yeah.
This is the Haunted Stars Imperial Rye Porter with Nola coffee. So, kind of sipping on it already. The coffee is pretty overpowering.
What's the
ABV?
ABV?
At least right now. Let me look. Sorry. I'm having a hard time. Oh, there we go. 8.0. 8.0.
Okay, so you got a big one.
Yeah, so it's a big one. It's like I said, yeah, the coffee's a little overpowering. But it's still pretty cold. Hasn't been out of the fridge for very long yet. So I'll give you an update as the show goes along. But while I'm taking another sip and kind of making up my mind on my rating here, why don't you explain this week's rating system?
Yeah. So thank you to at WSU or WSU Brady 27 on Twitter. His name is Gokoogs, which is a great name. Hopefully his parents gave him that name. That would be amazing. Or they legally changed it to their name, which would be even better. But yeah, so he suggested last week, right before didn't have time to do it. It was right while we were recording. So, but to rate our beers on as a seed in the NCAA tournament, given that we are very deep into the NCAA tournament at this point. So, Jeff, what seed would you assign that? Assuming it made the tournament. I mean, if it was really, really bad, you could say like, no way, they didn't even make the tournament. But
well, even like Bud Light would be like a 16 seed, right? I mean, that would be with chicory, vanilla, and almonds. And I'm embarrassed to admit I don't know what chicory is. Do you know what chicory is?
I want to say it is a wood.
Okay.
No, that's not right. Maybe like a nut of some sort.
That would make sense.
It's
if only we had computers right in front of us where we could look this up.
Chicory is a cultivated edible plant, so way off on all parts. It's kind of like flour. As we've talked about, Modern Times is a vegan brewery, so they use some pretty interesting ingredients. Apparently, it's used as a coffee substitute.
Okay, yeah. So I was gonna say, you're probably looking at the same thing I am, and you being a history major might enjoy this. During World War. Was it 1 or 2? Anyway, France used chicory to make their coffee last longer. So it was a thing done. Oh no, this is even longer than that. Are you kidding me? Okay, here we go. No one is sure exactly when people began mixing chicory with coffee, But according to Anthony Wilde, author of Coffee: A Dark History, the use of chicory became popular in France during Napoleon's continental blockade of 1808, which resulted in a major coffee shortage. So there you go.
And interesting, another thing. So you said it's brewed with Nola coffee, which I assume is from New Orleans. Apparently, coffee and chicory blends are very popular in New Orleans.
That would make sense.
So that must be why they added that.
Yeah. So it's definitely kind of like I said, the coffee's a little much at the moment. But like I said, I'm kind of interested to see how it tastes and mellowed out. Right now, I would put this at it's like a 5 seed. I'd make it like a 5 seed. Like, it's good. It's got a shot. I mean, hey, Auburn's in the Final Four. But maybe just outside, getting a pod close to their campus in a region that they like. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that was fun. Our listeners learning right along with us about chicory.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Napoleon, and its relation to Napoleon.
Yeah.
Great. So I am drinking a beer tonight from Three Magnets. That is a brewery in Olympia. I used to live in Olympia, and I frequented this brewery quite a bit. I'm friends with several of the people that are involved, and so take my reviews for what you will, given that factoid. So the beer I'm drinking is called One Cap Kolsch. So it is a kind of a joke in reference. It was brewed in collaboration with a bottle shop called Full Throttle Bottles in Georgetown, the area of Seattle, not Washington, D.C. Georgetown is obviously where the old Rainier Brewery is located, and they're just down the block from the old Rainier Brewery, where actually Georgetown Brewing is right next to there, and then Tully's Coffee used to be in that space, but I'm not sure what's in there now. But this One Cap Kolsch, I'll read the can because it's funny. So the can is if it, I know Jeff you are, and if anyone's familiar with the app called Untapped.
I'm familiar with Untapped.
It's basically a beer logging and rating thing where you can just kind of log the beers you have. You can rate them if you want. You don't have to. You can put comments. You don't have to put comments. It's pretty open. I like to use it a lot. Like I take everything with a grain of salt on there. So like what this kind of is in referencing is a lot of the styles on Untapped that do well, that get higher ratings, are like hazy IPAs, bourbon barrel aged stouts, and that's, those will always be the highest rated beers, regardless of if it's a well-made hazy IPA, regardless of if it's a well-made bourbon barrel stout. I've noticed I kind of have to, when I'm trying to decide, use Untapped as a source to decide if a beer is maybe good or not. You find out that, the best lagers, the best pilsners, the best kolsches will still be rated in like the 3 5s, 3 6s out of 5 caps. They do caps instead of stars, although most people say stars anyway, because the little caps kind of look like stars. So yeah, you'll see that. So, sometimes if I see a pilsner is rated like 3.8, I'm like, oh, that's probably a damn good pilsner. If I see an IPA that's rated 3.8, I'm like, that's probably not a very good IPA, because or if it's a clean IPA, then maybe it might be good. But if it's a hazy IPA, it's rated 3.8, it's probably not that good because people automatically rate them higher. So this is kind of in reference to that. They actually, Nate, the owner, went on his Facebook and just asked everyone, all of his friends basically, to go on to Untapped and rate the beer one cap. And let me go see what it's at right now. Some people have screwed it up a little bit, but nothing ever gets rated this low. Even like Busch Light is like a 2.8 or something. So people have been messing it up. It's at 1.27 now, so I don't think people are not getting the joke. I see the last guy that rated it gave it a 3.75. And so they wanted it to be 1, and it was 1 for a long time. But there's some. So I've never. This is the first time I've had this beer, but I've already rated it on Untapped as 1 star. So I think it's really funny. I've talked to the breweries, a friend of mine. He said they've gotten lots of calls from breweries around the country that want to do like a kind of series where they can do other styles that are one cap, asking permission if they can do a similar type of beer. So it's really funny because Kolsch is obviously not a popular, trendy style, but it is an interesting style. So typically in beer is divided by lagers and ales, and with lagers, just broadly, they're fermented with yeast strains that ferment at roughly 40 degrees, 45 degrees, cold ferment beer. That's when you hear Coors Light say cold fermented. It's like, yeah, it's because it's a lager. That's why it's cold fermented. It wouldn't be a lager if it, but and then ales are typically fermented at used with strains that ferment at 70 degrees room temperature ish, 65 to 70 degrees around there. So what happens with the Kolsch is it uses an ale yeast, but so you initially ferment it for maybe about a week at the 70 degrees, and then you cold condition it for another 4 to 6, or even however long you want to, however long you feel comfortable. You cold condition it for another 4 to 6 weeks at roughly 35 to 40 degrees. So it's fermented at both temperatures. So it's they call it a hybrid beer. It's not necessary. It's closer to an ale probably, but it's not necessarily an ale, not necessarily a lager. So it's a pretty interesting style. It's a German style. So a lot of these weird styles that come out like that are from Germany because they're brewing. The German purity laws. The brewers were so restricted because they couldn't add anything but hops and water and yeast and grain to their beers. So they had to kind of come up with things. That's where a lot of smoked barley, like smoked styles come from, because you smoke the grain, smoke the barley. And then these weird styles like a Kolsch, like Hefeweizens, where they're murky and they use wheat and stuff. So Germany, they kind of had to innovate within a box, and so you get weird styles like this. So it's typically typically with a Kolsch you get kind of a fuller body than a lager, but still a crisp finish. This one definitely hits that. It's got a nice body. It's not super clear, but I honestly haven't had a lot of Kolsch's that are always super clear, and also the can have some impact on that too. But it's definitely it's I would say a little hoppier than like a traditional German Kolsch, but it's pretty good that way. I used to I would never touch a style like this because it was too light, and I just want the flavor, man. But as I've kind of gone along my beer journey, I've come back to appreciating these lighter styles, like a Kolsch, like a Pilsner, like a Helles Lager, or anything like that. And I find myself when I go to like beer bars, I'll be like looking for something like that on the menu, because I'm just like, I don't want to sit here and get shit faced. Yeah, so it's a pretty well done Kolsch. It's really funny. So yeah, the guy that owns Full Throttle Bottles, Jonathan, is a smart ass, so it's perfect right along them, and the guys at Three Mags are smart asses. So it's worked out really. They've actually gotten a lot of pub out of it, so it's very good for them. It's funny to watch the confusion of some people, but it's definitely a reference to Untapped. And then so if you're not on Untapped, you probably won't get it, but if you go into my Twitter account, go to the podcast Pod versus Everyone Twitter account, I took a picture of the can. It's pretty funny. Go have a look. So how I would rate this beer, so because it's a Kolsch style, and just in keeping with the trend of the name, I got to give it a 16 seed, but it's definitely like a 16 seed that was higher rated. Like it's definitely it's the best 16 seed. It's not in the 200s. It's like sitting at 130, and it was a strong field. So normally that'd be a team that might fall in the 15 or 14 line, but they're up there. So they're gonna be tough. They'll give the 1 seed the 1 seed bourbon barrel aged stout with like donuts in it or whatever. They'll give them the run for their money. But yeah, this is but still it's a 1 cap. I'm gonna check into it again, 1 cap, because I gotta stick with that. I almost want to do it like a quarter cap just to kind of even out some of these other dudes that didn't get the reference. But yeah, so just I'm Kolsching it tonight. Definitely a change from the 12% barrel aged beer I had last week, barrel aged Imperial Red Ale I had last week. So keeping the cows low and keeping my slim body. I'm over 20 pounds down, so I'm even with drinking those beers, so I'm feeling good. But yeah, 1 star, 16 seed, feeling good, man.
Good. Yeah, that sounds tasty. I know that like I'm kind of with you, not so much in the desiring lighter type beers very often, but during the summertime it actually is really a really nice way to go. I like it because it's warm out, and you just start thinking about I'm about to drink this 7.5% IPA, and maybe so. But I think that's also kind of where some of the hazy stuff comes in, because it does have sort of a refreshing quality to it. It's a little less you don't get sort of overpowered by the bitterness if you're going to drink 3 or 4 of them, right?
Yeah, it's less abrasive. You can eat something else and taste it. Yeah.
But the nice thing about, the lighter beers, the lagers, the pilsners, the kolsches during the summer is, a lot of times we do these things while we're cooking out in the backyard or whatever, and you're stuffing your face with food, and, there's nothing quite as awful as like, eating some food and then drinking sort of a heavier beer and then just feeling like, okay, now I don't actually want to move and it's 85 degrees outside. So
yeah. And if you're going the distance at a cookout or something, and you're going to be drinking for hours at a time, even if but difference between a 4.5% Kolsch and a 7.5% IPA, you're making that up pretty quickly. You can put a few more down, and I know I definitely have a sidecar beer, but because it's so much lighter, I'm just like sucking it down. I'm gonna regret not having more sidecar beers by the end.
We will definitely, so for listeners, we will definitely hit up some Pilsner and lager recommendations this summer, as we get sort of closer to the time for that style. So,
well, so last week, Kyle Sherwood was on, and he talked about not knowing what I meant by a sidecar beer, and he referenced the sidecar IPA from from
I think it's Sierra Nevada, right?
Yeah, and so but my sidecar beer is typically a Pilsner. It's usually the Freem Pilsner. But this week it is the because it was just released, and they only release it like about twice a year. The Three Fates Czech style Pilsner from Holy Mountain. I stopped by and got 3 4-packs there. It is not a cheap Pilsner. Holy Mountain likes to charge a little more for their product, and it sells, so good for them. But it's just a delicious beer. I love it. I honestly, I wish they would just make it a year-round beer. It's so crushable and such a well-done Pilsner. And yeah, so I'll be drinking that after I put down my Kolsch. And then so it's all about light beer today, and keeping sober for this podcast.
Do you think Kyle Smith likes beer? He seems like a guy who likes beer.
I think Kyle Smith likes beer, and I definitely think he's more of a what is he from He grew up in Texas.
Yeah, he's originally from Texas.
He's very big at Lone Star and Shiner drinker. Yeah, I would say he probably like craves that and loves to go back and get it. That would just be my guess.
Yeah, he strikes me like a no nonsense, I just want a beer kind of guy,
Yeah.
And I don't need nothing fancy. I just want a beer. It seems like, and you know what? I just like him so much. Fine, good. Drink whatever you want. I
Yeah.
I won't even think less of you if you order a Coors Light at the bar.
Yeah. No. I wouldn't think less of any of you.
Liar. No, I will just secretly judge you, and then I'll just tell you, no, it's cool. Order a Coors Light, no big deal.
But yeah, Kyle Smith, eh?
Yeah.
So it wasn't official when we had our podcast last week. So just to be front up, we definitely were going to talk a lot more about spring ball, but this coaching hire has awoken something dormant within both of us, and we are at our hearts basketball nerds, and this hire has definitely got us wanting to talk about basketball again, and it feels good after drudging through 5 years of Ernie to just finally have something fun to talk about, something to look forward to. Jeff, honestly, like going back to the song I was singing, I think it was maybe Theo, or maybe it might have been a group interview that got you heard from Marvin Cannon and Gervais Robinson talking about how the first practice with Kyle Smith was just defensively focused, and how they were just like, man, that was hard, focus on defense. I think that speaks a lot about what the hell they were doing or not doing in the last regime. But that had me excited immediately, like just playing some fucking defense and dedicating to that, because that's honestly our quickest way to improvement, is just improving that defense.
Yeah, I mean that's a great way to put it, because our people who have been fans for some time will remember the immediate improvement that the Cougars made when Dick Bennett took over, and obviously, I don't think Kyle Smith is Dick Bennett, and I think even he would say that. But at the same time, it's sort of like, yeah, it's what are the things that you can control, with effort and discipline. Buckets are going to be buckets, and they're going to go in and they're going to be out, and we've talked, however many times on this podcast about the 3-point lottery and all that stuff. Shooting comes and goes, but sort of the common saying is that defense travels. And I think we both have sort of thought for some time that, that a defense first mentality was the way to go with our program. And I do think that, I don't know how many more games they're going to win next year, but I do know this: they are going to look like they have a clue, unlike, the last basically 5 years. I'll say 4. Ernie's first year, they looked like they were trying to actually do something. And even though the defense was, by adjusted defensive efficiency, that was actually his second worst defense next to this past year. So the defense was, patently horrendous, but at least on offense, they looked like they were trying to do a thing. Devontae Lacey was, shooting these transition threes, and, they looked like they had a philosophy and a style. And then of course,
well, yeah. And we should note that it was a dramatic improvement from the offense the year before under Ken Bone.
Huge improvement over that last offense.
Largely the same guys. So
that last offense under Ken Bone was one of the worst things I have ever seen. And I try not to be prone to hyperbole, but I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say that. They were playing super, super slow. They were turning the ball over. They were missing shots. Like it was one of the more painful things I have ever watched on a team that I've watched. And I'm a Mariners fan, so that's really saying something. So, and a Cougar fan from Paul Wolf days. So yeah, they, at least Ernie looked like he had a clue. The first year, last 4 years, everything was just sort of a mess. And next year it will look very different. It will look like they have a clue. It will look like they're trying hard, because he demands it. And particularly on defense, which is really where you kind of see the hustle, right? Because on offense, it's hard to see hustle, just in the sense that, you're running these sets, there are these movements. A lot of times you're not, full blast, whatever. Defense, you can see it. You can see the effort. You can see the energy. And we're going to see that. next year. And that's going to be kind of a fun thing for our fans to latch on to, along with the nerd ball thing, which we've talked about. I'm sure we'll talk about some more. I just feel like he's going to give our fans something to sort of like wrap their arms around and be like, okay, this is what we're doing. And I can see it kind of like, with the air raid where it's like, I can see what we're doing and I can wrap my arms around this thing.
Yeah. And so you wrote a nice post on Coug Center this week about the what the roster he has to work with, and then he was talking about the Almighty Eight, which was coined by Isaiah Wade. So we're talking about the eight. We're not fully sure which eight those are, but we know that Carter Skaggs is gone, and I think both of us would agree that Carter Skaggs would not fit with this defensive philosophy. He's completely out. He's totally out of position defensively. He's got the quickness of a 7-footer but whatever. I don't want to pile on him, but whatever. He's a great shooter.
And he'll land somewhere where that shooting is valued, and his lack of athleticism won't be quite such an issue on defense. So he'll be fine, and good for him.
I definitely think he will. And I think he'll find a place where he's open more frequently, and we'll have to be forcing looks, and he won't be just the guy that comes in to make the three, and so he's got to shoot everything he sees. So I think that'll be a good transfer for him. Looking at the rest of the roster, when I'm looking at the guys we have coming back that would fit with this style, so just from a size and athleticism standpoint, I got to think Ellaby and Gervais Robinson and Isaiah Wade and Ayaz Kuntz can be coached up to be good defenders. And then another guy that already has some good fundamental defense, especially in the post, and he's got the effort there, and he's a good box out guy, is Jeff Pollard, who Kyle Smith said was on an official visit while he was doing his introductory press conference, but he obviously wants him back because that's easily the biggest body that the Cougars have, that the Cougars would have next year. You got some maybe some size coming in from the recruiting class, but that's not a given. But Pollard at 6'9", 240. Otherwise, Isaiah Wade's your most experienced big, and he's 6'7", 220. So that's not exactly the recipe for success in man-to-man with such a small. I mean, it's not as bad as it used to be because there's smaller guys everywhere. But yeah, Jeff, overall, and obviously one guy that there's a question mark is Ahmed Ali, because he got beat up defensively this year. It's very obvious. He's got quick hands. He can pick up a steal here and there, but not as much as you would think. And that's one guy that, Jeff, I'm thinking like, where would he fit? Because I know one of the podcasts that Smith was on, I believe it was the Jordan Sperber's podcast. You'll have to remind them of the name of that podcast.
Solving Basketball.
Solving Basketball. Thank you.
Yeah.
But definitely you should listen to that. Solving Basketball with Kyle Smith. And you should just listen to a lot of his assistants and former assistants have been on that podcast. So just give that a listen. And then there's another podcast with assistant coach with Colgate. Jeff, do you remember the name of that one?
Yeah. So it's Stat Chat with Dave Klatsky.
Yeah, Dave Klatsky. He's an assistant coach with Colgate, and he's just a big nerd. But anyway, so Smith made this point talking about how he coaches, and we can kind of get into how his actual analytics approach is, but coaches will have obviously clung. I think once you saw Brad Smith have all this like wild success in referencing KenPom and everything, coaches started looking at KenPom. Any coach worth anything would start looking at KenPom. But Smith talked about how guys they would be drawn to the offensive rating of a guy. So offensive rating is roughly what a player would be expected to produce points wise over 100 possessions. Usually, depending on their usage, but a guy with Ahmed Ali's usage, 107.6 is pretty good. It's definitely a serviceable offensive player. You would hope that he would shoot threes a little better, but he takes a lot of deep ones, so that makes it a little tougher. But he says coaches might be obsessed with the guy's offensive rating and not even consider what they're doing on the defensive end. That was one thing that encouraged me about when listening to him talk, is that he doesn't just he likes the stats, but he's not stuck to the stats. Because you and I know, we use these for analysis a lot, but we've used them so much that we can kind of read into them a little more. There isn't, I don't know of a good website with I know for NBA players, they have defensive ratings, which are rated similar to the offensive rating, just inverse. But I don't know of a good way at NCAA. So with NCAA, it's more of, you have to use your eyes and look at the guy. And I would put Ali in that category, of a good offensive player who probably gives up as much as he gets on defense.
Yeah, I would agree. And, as soon as Smith was hired, I kind of thought, okay, well, who's going to be the point guard? Robinson, I felt like was probably the front runner, probably the guy who would take over that role. Partly because, he's a little bigger. If you're going to go defense first, you got a guy out there who's 6'2" versus 5'11". If that's what you value. And you make a good point about the offensive rating stuff. Smith kind of said it's really easy to get kind of in the weeds on those numbers because they're almost all offense focused.
Yep.
It's really hard to measure defense. And I think, honestly, I think that's why sort of the thing that's come up here, today and yesterday, as we record this Tuesday night, talking about the motion tracking systems that they want to install, that he had installed at in San Francisco, that, people are talking about, okay, is he going to install them, here in Pullman? And, that's where those really, on the defensive end is really where those can really make their money. He mentioned specifically, that those cameras can measure a closeout, how fast do you close out? How close did you get on the closeout? Things that aren't really easy to see, even watching on video, that things aren't easy to see. These things can measure with pretty good precision. So, that's where, I'm sort of just like in love and encouraged by what he does. He understands, the limitations of analytics. He clearly understands what it's telling him and what it's not telling him. And he has just a clear sense of just sort of the value of each thing. And he seems like a guy who is really good at sort of keeping the plain things the main things. I had a pastor once who would say that, keep the plain things the main things. And it's like, he would love these little sayings, but they become aphorisms for a reason, right? Where it's like, okay, so it makes sense. And he's like, he talks about how, there's the story in the Nerdball story in The Athletic where his desk is, full of stuff and he has to tell his secretary to get it all off his desk. Otherwise he'll just, stare at it all day long. I think he just has a clear sense after doing this for so long. And I think that that's another really cool part of this, is that he's, damn near 50 years old. He'll be 50 before next season starts. He's been coaching for, half his life. And he talked about how he was 0 for 11 on his first, for his first 11 head coaching interviews. This is a guy who's been around. This is a guy who's committed to what he does. And he has some sense. They even talked about this on one of the podcasts. I don't remember which one, but, he kind of talked about how, he would have this, basically same presentation when he would go through interviews talking about what they do and why they do it. And, he said the majority of the time, the ADs or the presidents would just be like, I don't get it. And he's like, well, then I guess this isn't for me. And as time went on, he stuck with it and stuck with it and stuck with it. He's committed to it. He believes in it. He's seen it work at Columbia. He's seen it work at San Francisco. Is it going to work in a power conference? Who knows? It might not. But this is all about probabilities, right? And it's about, getting a guy who has a probability of success. And, I truly, truly, truly believe there wasn't a guy out there who was within WSU's reach. I mean, we're not talking about, oh, hey, bring Tony Bennett back. I mean, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about, guys who were legit, reasonable candidates. I don't think there's anybody out there who was legit, reasonable candidate who gives WSU a greater probability of success than Kyle Smith does.
Yeah, I've over the last week, I've definitely come to that conclusion as well. It's exactly the type of guy we're looking for. He's doing things differently. Obviously, in the last podcast, we talked about his recruiting, looking in different places. We saw some quotes from what they heard from Aaron Baines, talking about the importance of recruiting in Australia and recruiting internationally. And just it's been cool to come out and see over the last week the way that the way that Pat Chun and Kirk Schultz sort of went out and got advice. Like they really looked at what has made Cougar basketball good before. And I think the last hire was made in terms of what can we looking for a style of play that might get people excited or something, because coming off the Leach hire
for sure.
Moose was like, okay, we had air raid, that's all about putting points up. Let's look at a coach who plays fast tempo, and so he already had a coach that had done that and went for that same guy. And so the process there wasn't a process that was that was about winning games. It was a process about creating excitement. But the irony there is the coach that put the most people in the stands was Tony Bennett, and he played what the untrained eye would call the most boring style of basketball, with those limited possessions. But I mean, personally, I'm ready for these hour and 45-minute games again, but
hell yeah.
I loved being, I was back at my dorm 2 hours after the game started. That was great. Or actually my house where I was living, but yeah, well, with Dick Bennett was my dorm, but yeah, so, but that's beside the point. Winning puts people in the seats. That it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you get there. Martin Stadium tickets have sold more as the football team has won more. They did sell more because of Mike Leach, and there was no basketball coach we were going to get with that similar, reputation and gravitas that was just going to come in and immediately, just by name, excite the fan base. But I do think, especially after the press conference and some of the articles you've seen come out in Seattle Times and other places, spokesmen, I think that the fan base is getting excited about this now. I don't think they were last week when it was announced. They didn't know who this guy was, but now that they've seen the guy and they've listened to the guy and they've heard from the guy and they've heard from the players about the guy, and they've heard from, Klay Thompson and Aaron Baines and George Raveling and Kelvin Sampson and Tony Bennett about the guy, I think that this is something that has got the fan base excited, and just as excited as when they hired Ernie.
And I think it makes a difference that that the full weight of the administration is behind him too. I don't like, I think these things go hand in hand. I mean, Schultz and Chun, have sort of been unequivocal in their praise of him and that he's the right guy and we're going to do this right. For as much as Bill Moose sort of loved the spotlight, he wasn't, I don't know, it's like hard to say, like he wasn't a great salesperson. I mean, you didn't hear him come out and say a whole bunch like, hey, we should be excited about this. This guy is great. it was just sort of like, well, here's the guy and it's going to be awesome. And part of that was, he hires Leach and Leach does all the talking and it's fine. But I just feel like with Schultz and Chun, you just have this strong sense of the direction of everything. And that probably sounds funny and vague and whatever, but you just feel like, okay, this whole thing, there's a plan, like there's a method behind what they are doing. It is not, the cheap way out, which is sort of been the reputation of the athletic department for pretty much its entirety. Right. And even when Bill Moose was, spending all the money to build facilities and whatever, there was just sort of this sense that we had kind of won the lottery, right? Because that was based largely at the time on, the launch of the Pac-12 networks, the new TV contract that the Pac-12 had signed with ESPN and Fox. There was just sort of this sense like, oh, we got this windfall, let's build some shit, and, this feels much more like a cohesive, comprehensive plan. We're going to do things this way. When we fired Ernie Kent, it wasn't an irrational decision. It was a rational decision that said, look, there's a cost to not firing somebody. There's a cost to continuing on the way that we are. And we decided that cost was greater than the cost of firing him. And all of a sudden, like all these people that were wringing their hands about the money situation, all of a sudden just kind of went, oh, okay. Like it was just like, I don't know. And so I feel like the buy-in here is part what they're doing. It's part what, I mean, I don't know how many people watched, Smith's press conference. But what the things that he did there didn't surprise me after listening to him on a couple of podcasts. He's kind of a dork. And I love it, like he had this joke about Tony Bennett that just sort of like wasn't executed very well, and he laughed at his own joke, and then everybody else sort of like giggled at it, and he was just sort of like sitting back there still laughing at his own joke. I was just like, he did the whole Saint Tony thing. Anyway, it's just I think fans are really going to appreciate him for his directness, for his honesty. I think the players are going to appreciate him for the same thing. And I really feel like, he's a guy who's going to be candid, and is going to be a guy who, like we said, is going to play a style that fans can really get behind. Cause I think there is going to be immediate improvement. I don't know how many more games they're going to win next year, but it'll be more. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I definitely think from an offensive efficiency standpoint, he can keep them on the same level, and the defense is just going to be a drastic improvement. I mean, you just look at what he did his first year at USF. You logged me out, Ken Palm. What the hell? Help me out, Jeff.
His first year.
Okay, no, I got it. So his first year at USF, they made quite a dramatic improvement. They went from under Rex Walters, they were number 291 in adjusted defensive efficiency, and then Kyle Smith's first year they were number 59. So that is 291 is, and he referenced this in he referenced Ken Palm adjusted efficiency defense in his press conference, which Jeff and I were like, ooh. This is one of our guys.
A coach that speaks our language is just like, we're like, so we have like hearts in our eyes. It's so just amazing.
I mean, it is within the realm of possibility that he didn't do that same improvement when he went to Columbia, but he was his first time being a head coach.
Yep.
And we'll probably get into this in a little later, but when Tony Bennett went to Virginia, he did not have an immediate improvement on the defense. It was Tony Bennett's third year or fourth year as a head coach. And it was the first time he had to install that defense on his own without his dad. So you see Kyle Smith, so I think sometimes people forget that, like most of us in our jobs, we get better at them the more we do them. Coaches can get better too. Yeah. And so that's what's nice about getting a guy. He's definitely got some years under his belt, but I think he's still got some room for improvement. So that's why, fourth place in WCC may be one thing, but this guy's doing things the right way. And so that's, it's great. So yeah, if we can keep an offense, around the top 100 and then have a top 59 defense. Jesus, I'm not saying that we go 50. I don't know if we have the guys on the roster to have that good of a defense, but even if you improve to 100, like, it's an insane improvement. So it's really exciting that the first thing they did at practice was defense. I know that's what I said last time, but this is so important to me, and I know it's important to you, Jeff.
Yep.
When we were looking at candidates, we kind of, you say, like, well, it's just a guy with a style, but honestly, a defensive style was preferred, and a guy who emphasizes rebounding, which he does, defensive rebounding, plays man-to-man defense, which he does. I watched it was painful, but I watched they have the full game of when they played at Gonzaga. They got their butts kicked, but they're playing man-to-man from the start, and Gonzaga is a dramatically more athletic and talented team than they are, but they're playing man-to-man from the start. And so that if you stick to a defensive philosophy, it's going to work better. And even if you have lesser athletes, which we saw in Dick Bennett's years when with Robbie Cowgill as a freshman playing center, and the Kyle Weaver and those guys having the number 2 defensive efficiency in the country, an awful offense, but like you can coach that defense up, and that's what's exciting. Focus on the defense. And again, he's not Dick Bennett. He's not like I'm not going to expect like top 10 defensive efficiencies, top even, not necessarily top 50, but I could see him getting to a point where he's that good, because he's only 49. He's got a lot of years ahead of him. And so he's got a lot of improvement. Coaches improved. Tony Bennett improved. Obviously, look at where he's at now. But it's exciting to know that I don't think he's done. Like, I don't think he's a finished product, but what he has is great.
Yeah, and I think really kind of my final thought on him from yesterday is this, that he very clearly wanted this job. This was something that he wanted, that he was pursuing. This was not a situation where, okay, I guess I'll take it. And of course the whole, Coug fan telling everybody that, nobody wants this job. And then kind of what I wrote, and it's like, yeah, like it was really clear. If you haven't watched it, make sure and make some time and watch it. It'll only take, he's up on the mic for, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. So it won't take a ton of time. But it was just very, very clear that he wanted to be here, and that he was excited for the challenge. And, again, that's the kind of thing that I think you only get from a guy who has been around for a long time and hasn't had a big time opportunity. And, people would argue, oh, WSU is not big time. Okay, fine. But it's in the Pac-12. And not only that, let's just be real. He was probably never, ever, ever going to make an NCAA tournament at San Francisco. And that's not even necessarily a knock on him. That's just the reality of the situation. You've got Gonzaga at the top. You've got St. Mary's playing number 2. And then it's everybody else, fighting for scraps. And when you play in the WCC and BYU, right. And who is, going to hire a new coach and should be back here pretty soon. And so it's like, yeah, good luck, right? Good luck getting in the tournament with that.
Is the WCC going to get 4 bids?
Yeah, the WCC is not getting 3 or 4 bids. They got 2 this year because Gonzaga tanked in the championship. So, I mean, it's like, this is his opportunity. I mean, if he can simply create a top 4 team at Washington State, like he did at San Francisco, that's in most years going to be good enough to get in the tournament,
Well, yeah, that's what when we were talking about, after Ernie was fired, the type of guy that we'd be looking for. You like to see how a guy performs against his peers, and he performed well in the Ivy League, and frankly, he took 2 programs that had no business being in the top half of their leagues, right, in Columbia and San Francisco, and made them both top half league teams. And we were talking about this last week, the expectations at WSU. If we're a top half of the league team, most years in the Pac-12, you're getting in the NCAA tournament with that.
Yep.
And two, that's well beyond 90% of WSU's basketball seasons, 95 probably percent of WSU's basketball seasons. So like that is what we want. And so, it's not a splash hire, who knows if he can win a Pac-12 championship, but I'm confident he can get us into, top 4, top 5. And most years that'll be a great season like that we'll have memories and tell our kids about. So, but I want to make one point before we moved on from our new Lord and Savior Kyle Smith. Sorry, Gardner.
You've been supplanted as our savior. Sorry.
Although Gardner has results, Kyle doesn't have results yet. But we're basketball nerds. Sorry, Gardner. It's got to be nerdball. Data attack sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Oh, there was another one in there, but it's
the Matrix.
Matrix something.
The Matrix, and then there was Smith. I don't know, Smith something. I don't know.
Nerdball.
Yeah, nerdball's got to be it. Nerdball's great. It can be communicated with 2 emojis. Like it's catchy. Nerdball is it.
Pat,
Don't
Pat,
mess with awesome.
I know you're listening, Pat.
That's right.
Drop the data attack and the other ones. Just nerdball.
Yep, got to be nerdball.
It's nerdball, man.
Dude, I mean, seriously, don't you just, okay, so you remember the last, you remember senior day in 2008, and everybody wore ties,
yep,
right, to the game. Yeah,
I was in the front row of the student section.
I was not in the front row. I was in the last row. I was in the last row of Beasley for that game.
I still had my student pass. And because I was student teaching in the fall semester, and apparently it carries over, which I found out like in line, I found out because it was the only game I had went to because I was poor. I was just out of college. I couldn't drive to Pullman from Seattle all the time, but because I was paying to live in Seattle. So we went to that game. I have a picture with like Tony Bennett from that game and all that stuff, and so. Yeah, so those long lost lovers, but yeah. So I that game. If you look at the highlights of that game, my sister and I are very prominently featured in the crowd shots, and I didn't just do a tie. I did a full on collared shirt underneath my Zucru shirt with a crimson tie and everything. But yeah, that was, we had tie one. I think they had shirts, tie one on for Tony.
Yeah.
Because he didn't wear a tie until that very first fucking press conference when he's wearing a tie. And we're like,
for Virginia. God damn it. I know. We're going to get over this. But, my point was that, there are things like that you can get fans to grab onto. And so it's like, I'm just envisioning, the Zoo Crew wearing these, plastic glasses, these thick frame glasses with no lens, with no lenses in them, right? Where it's like, just everybody wearing these thick frame glasses and it's, nerdball. Anyway, I have these visions of these things that we can do that to sort of make it ours. And I really think
let's take it from Stanford.
Let's do it. They're not the nerds. They're not that nerdy. So let's do it. Let's make it. Plus, do they run a Princeton offense? We're going to run a Princeton offense. What's nerdier than running a Princeton offense?
Nothing in the entire world. We're going to run a Princeton offense. We're like, it's going to be less than 5 seconds on the shot clock every single time.
Every time. It's going to be great. Yep. All right. Should we start our Tony Bennett therapy session?
All right. Well, we've
already talked about.
He's obviously on our minds.
I know. We are like the ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend that just can't stop talking about how great this person was that they dated, even though they broke their heart.
Yeah, after it was late at night after watching Virginia make that miraculous win to go to the Final Four. I think it was about 1 a.m. I emailed Tony's UVA address, just you up, but I didn't get any response. So obviously, but yeah, Tony Bennett's in his first Final Four, matching his dad. Look, I'll say it. So before, the funny thing is, before last year, I had decided that, you know what, like I just didn't feel the animosity that I had felt anymore. And I was like, you know what? I love watching Virginia play basketball because it just reminds me of like the good WSU teams. Like just you see the players and the roles they're playing and everything, like, and I would just find myself like rooting for them even though I was like trying really hard not to. And so I was like, before the tournament last year, I'm like, all right, I think I put Virginia as the national champion in my brackets, and I was like, I'm all in. I'm gonna root for Tony, and fuck if they lose, become the first 16 seed to lose to, or first one to lose to 16, which actually was like, okay, like that was like a pound of flesh that I didn't know I needed. Like, like I was like, okay, actually, like.
I feel better now.
I feel better now. So
like some kind of penance had been paid.
So now it's like this kind of like you're of two minds because like you watch Tony have success, and I truly respect the man. I know how he left wasn't the greatest thing, but he's a good person. I love his dad to pieces. Like it's like he's just like. Like I, you know, when I was a freshman at college, was his first year coaching at WSU, Dick Bennett, and then so like I had Dick Bennett for 3 years, and we didn't win a lot of games, but man, like he was just like he flipped off the UW student section. He was just this passionate guy, and it was so endearing, and just in invoking a style of play at WSU and in creating interest in basketball at WSU. You know, you just gotta like, you know, you love Dick Bennett, and one of the things on was it Sunday or Saturday? Saturday. So when Virginia pretty much had it wrapped up and they were shooting free throws in overtime, they panned the crowd and Dick Bennett, and he's smiling, which is an incredibly rare sight. Because when they made that. Was it Diakite, however you say his name? Diakite. When he made that, after the great pass from the freshman point guard, to send it in overtime, you look at the crowd. It's every Virginia person is freaking out, and there's just one guy in a white polo that just didn't move. And like when they pan the crowd, you see Dick Bennett's face, and he's got that sourpuss face. That's Dick Bennett, I know. But then when they panned in overtime and they're gonna win, there's this little smiles cracked his face. And then of course there was this interview with him after, and then that gif of Tony breaking up the interview with Matt Norlander and giving him a hug, and it's just like, God, like I just want to hate you, man, but I can't. Like
right in the feels.
But it's just like you still have this. You still have this longing of what could have been, you know. She went off to a prettier or a better looking, more hulky, more successful guy, but you still think that maybe, you know, you could have been great together, and it's tough, man. It's tough.
Yeah, it's for me. I didn't get to watch the game. Well, let me take that back. I watched the first half, and then I had to. I went with my family to go see Dumbo, which was good, by the way. And, you know, I got back and it was late. And so I wasn't going to watch it that night, but I had DVR going. I'm going to watch it the next morning along with the Sounders. Going to get up and, you know, watch that with a little coffee, watch the two games. Went to turn on the game and realized that I had screwed up the DVR, which of course, who among us has not screwed up a DVR recording, right? And so I did not have the second half of the game to watch. Sort of frantically went looking. I was like trying to see if there was like a recording somewhere, like online somewhere I could watch, whatever, you know, like I really wanted to watch the second half. So I had no idea what had happened. And then of course I stumbled on to the result, saw that they had won and whatever. And then eventually I watched NCAA actually does these condensed games where basically they show you just all the made buckets and then a few of the missed shots when a great defensive play is made, and they condense the game down to 13 minutes or something. So I watched that, and I saw they won. I went, oh, okay, that's nice, and so I watched it, and then I'm like, holy shit, are you kidding me? That's what happened, and then I was even more pissed at myself for screwing up the recording, right? But as I sort of watched some of the the post game videos and some of the reaction stories and things like that, I couldn't help but be happy, and I say this as someone who, as you know, Craig, was very bitter and very, very pissed at Tony for a very, 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 very long time. Maybe even up until the end of last season. I mean, what frustrated me about the way he left, it's not that he left. I think we all expected that was probably going to happen at some point. I think we all figured it, he wasn't long for Wazoo, but, I think most of us kind of hoped we would get maybe like 5-6 years out of the deal and not 3. And not only that, his stock was really at its highest after the second year, right? When, they make this Sweet 16 run. His name's being tossed around, I think, with Indiana and some other big names. I think Marquette might have even been open at the time.
Yep.
So those were the two big ones. And he said this quote, and I might be remembering wrong. I don't know. It could just be that I'm bitter. I have no idea. I've never been able to find it since, but I have this memory of him saying, hey, I'm not ready to leave yet. I want to see what we can build here. Nobody's ever really built something at Washington State, and I want to see what we can build. And I was like, yeah, at the time. And then, of course, a year later he bails, and really, and it's not even like, okay, so like, this is why we call it the therapy session, right? Because I'm like confessing all this stuff. It was when he left, it just felt very cold and really emotional.
He was on it, like he was on a plane. We saw him leaving on a plane, and then we saw him with an orange tie.
Exactly. He waved at everybody at the tarmac, and he was gone, and he hadn't said anything, and not that. I don't know. Like again, this is where I question my my rationality versus my fandom, right? Where like the rational me goes, this is just how it happens. I mean, look, we just got done celebrating Kyle Smith. That's how he did it, right? Like he was, all of a sudden it was, he's going to be at Washington State, and he left and he was gone. And
and he was USF's guy that was going to bring their program back.
Yeah, I mean, they gave him a raise. They gave him a raise a year ago.
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, he just did the same thing, and we're just like, hey, Kyle Smith is ours. So I get it, but
the funny thing is, that has nothing to do with anything, but like, UVA was like, who's this guy? Like,
totally. Their fans were like, we hired who? From where? And we're like, you assholes, like, we love him, like, how do you not know what you're getting? And so, so just kind of watching that process and just feeling like so abandoned, especially for a guy. And I know that, again, this is going to sound, however it's going to sound, but it's like, look, there is no Tony Bennett without Wazoo. Okay. Like I don't really know a nicer way to say it. Unless Jim Sturck calls up Dick Bennett and says, hey, what you doing?
Well, that was a funny thing. Kyle Smith in his press conference says, you all better believe that you had a part in what Tony Bennett has done. And I went like, fuck yeah, we had.
But yeah,
like, come on. Like, we brought his dad up. His dad came out of retirement to work so that we could make him his son head coach. Like, yes, of course we did that.
And when have you ever heard Tony say that? You know what I mean? It's like, so anyway, for a guy who's like, thankfulness and like all those 5 pillars and all that crap, it's like, I don't know. It's just like, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It probably shouldn't have. I fully admit it probably shouldn't have rubbed me the wrong way. It doesn't seem to have rubbed any of his players the wrong way. It doesn't seem to have rubbed anybody who knows him the wrong way. So this is probably a me issue, right? Like I'm fully ready to admit that this is a me issue. But for a long time, I was just like, you know what? Screw that guy. He can go do his thing at Virginia while we're left here with Ken Bone and Ernie Kent, and our program is burning to ashes. And it's like, you know what? Screw that. And as much as I appreciated what he what he was doing at Virginia as a coach, there was a lot of just like, it should have been us, or at the very least, like it should have been like a couple more years of us where we were on, more solid footing. And I think he felt like he was leaving us with solid footing. I mean, left us Klay Thompson, for fuck's sake. Like, I mean, like he left us some tools.
Klay Thompson, D'Angelo Casto,
left us
Brock
some
Modem, there's good players.
Xavier Thames, who ends up transferring, but also ends up becoming awesome. And it's like, okay, so he left us some stuff and whatever, but it's still just like, man, I would watch it and just think like, God, we had it. And I probably should be angry at, Ken Bone and Jim Sturk and Bill Moose and Ernie Cat. I mean, those are the people I should probably be angry at. At this point, I pretty much am. And so this is all a very long story to say, okay, so after the game, I saw the post game video and I saw him cutting down the nets and the joy that he was feeling, that he often, because he's such a the opposite of his dad, right? I mean, he's just very even keeled. Even last year when they lost the 16 seed, he was very just like, it's okay, we're gonna be okay. And I was just like, my God, like, so to see just sort of the raw emotion pour out of him, and we all know how competitive he is. I mean, look, those of us who were fans 10 years ago, we know, like, this is a ultra competitive guy. I mean, it's a guy who, made it to the NBA from, a mid-major school. I mean, ultra competitive, and to see that sort of pour out of him, and then to see the emotion from Dick and just sort of all that, I just went, you know what? God damn it. I can't be mad anymore. I'm really happy for them, and I am over it. And I declare for the whole world that, all the feelings I had, which were encapsulated perfectly by Kyle Sherwood 10 years ago or 11 years ago. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go to witchesofeastman.blogspot.com and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's like, I like finally, I can let go of that. And, I'm not going to say it feels good, cause whatever, I don't really care that much, but at the same time, like, I'm happy for them. I'm happy for both of them. And, just especially Dick, like, as a parent, and you're sort of getting this feeling now as a parent, it's like, yeah, like just when your kids do something. I mean, look, for you, I'm sure it's like when your kid like says part of a word or starts to kind of walk, and you're like, God damn, yeah, you fucking walk. You walk because you're a Powers, and that's fucking awesome, because that's the way parents are, right? And so to see Dick Bennett get to have that moment with Tony made me really happy too. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy for him. I'm totally pulling for him in the Final Four, pretty unabashedly at this point. And so go Tony, go Cougs, and I'm not sure if I could say go Cavaliers, but go Tony and go Dick and all that stuff.
I can't quite say go Who's or anything. I have a good friend whose daughter just decided to go there, so. But he'll be excited for that. But I was like, you don't even know the relationship I have with UVA. It's complicated. But yeah, I would unabashedly root for them. But you and I are in a pool which has, I believe, some money on the line.
Maybe,
and,
I don't know.
if Michigan State wins, then I win the pool, and if Virginia wins, actually you don't win, but this other guy wins.
No, I don't win.
Yeah. So it's between me and this other guy, but I wouldn't, so I'm not gonna lie. So my Amanda was watching with me while we were watching the game, and when they flashed to Dick Bennett like smiling after the game, like I fucking welled up, and I was like, oh, and I was just like, oh man, like I was hard. So I had been rooting for them, but I definitely was rooting for them to beat Oregon, even though I respect Dana Altman so much, and Oregon always hires these fucking coaches that I like, and well, it's easier once they got rid of Chip Kelly in football, but I'm just like, stop hiring people that are cool. But Dana Altman's great, but I also wanted to see better. Like, this is one of those years that it was just great. Like, there's just better teams in the Elite Eight, and it made for like one of the best Elite Eights we've ever seen. And so you just wanted to see And I'm personally like, so I was so I knew I was fully bought in when Diakite hit that tie-in shot, because I flipped. I jumped off my couch and screamed. I was like, yes. And I was like, all right, okay, fine. I'm definitely rooting for Virginia now. And but yeah, it's like, but there was a point, like, over the years where I would take offense to the fact when people said Tony's style couldn't win in March, which is a ridiculous statement. Like, I understand where people are coming from with upsets, but you're talking about a guy that loses 3 games all year in the ACC, and you're saying that style can't win suddenly in March. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's just like random things happened, but I mean, because Dick Bennett, his dad with that style, went to a Final Four. Tony has a Final Four, and he's the favorite to win the championship right now. Him or Michigan State. Michigan State's probably playing really well, like a 1 seed, like people thought they were going to be all year. But yeah, it's kind of like validation that even though, yeah, I mean, honestly, if you look at all the teams in the Final Four, with the exception of but with all teams in the Final Four, with the exception of Auburn, yeah, defense first clearly works, but obviously Virginia was very good offensively this year as well. But you have Virginia number 5 adjusted deficiency, Michigan State number 9, and Texas Tech, who is the most extreme of that, number 1 adjusted defensive efficiency. They obviously play quite a different style than Tony Bennett does. But and then 28th and 0, but they're in the Final Four, and it's not even a surprise. You're like, yeah, and they definitely uglied up some games, and we'll probably see some ugly games, but we'll see some good games too, because all 4 of the Final Four teams are in the top 11, and that's great. But anyway, so beside the point, yeah, I'm over it. Rooting for Tony. Just happy to see Dick Bennett happy. It's a weird feeling. We'll probably get some shit from some people based on what I saw on Twitter. But I'm over it. I'm over her. I definitely think Kyle Smith helps. But yeah, I'm looking forward to WSU basketball now, and I'm happy to see Tony Bennett succeed. So yeah, good therapy session, Jeff.
Yeah, that was good. I feel better. Do you feel better?
Yeah. And like you said, Tony Bennett, Kyle Sherwood on Wishes of Eastman. If you want to know exactly how I felt the moment that he left.
Yep.
Which was the exact 10-year anniversary of when he went to the Final Four. So. Yep. How about that symmetry? But
it's I mean, I imagine if you listen to this podcast, you are not sensitive to naughty words, but if for some reason you are, that Witches of Eastman post by Kyle might not be for you.
Yeah, definitely not.
It's got some naughty words in it.
Yeah. Well, just right up there, right up front.
More than
one.
What
you're getting.
It involves sexual acts in an ear, if that helps.
Oh, hey, the Mariners just won again.
Hey!
Hey.
Best team in baseball. Yeah. What else should we talk about? Where should we wrap this up? What else should we throw in?
Yeah, where are we at right now? I don't even know where we're at.
I don't know. You want to talk about?
Oh, damn, we're deep. We're deep.
You want to talk about our racist president?
Yeah. So we'll talk just briefly. So once again, the kind of just the such with ease that he lies. Like, so he tweeted out.
By the way, this is the Coastal Elites segment.
This is the Coastal Elites segment. I know we got some people on the right that listen to this and like the podcast. So y'all must not be that offended. And this is going to be a short one, because we are already deep into this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he tweeted out this week, which is just the the lies come so easy, and even when they conflict what his own administration says. So he says that Puerto Rico has already gotten $91 billion, and it's mostly their politicians have messed up the money. And the fact is that Puerto Rico has not gotten $91 billion. I didn't see the exact number, but it was definitely in the single digits. It might have been more closer to $1 billion. And there's a plan to give them that over a span of, I believe, 20 years. So they definitely have not already gotten $91 billion. And I know he wants to throw the blame on the Puerto Rican politicians, but frankly, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. I have a good friend from grad school who was Puerto Rican, and so I learned all about the rights that they have and do not have as U.S. citizens, including to vote. They do not have the right to vote, in the presidency and everything like that. But he lives in the U.S. now. But anyway, so they are American citizens though, and if you got to think if something like this happened on the lower 48 plus U.S. Alaska or plus Hawaii, Alaska, it would have been a completely different story. But I think that was obviously a situation that's been neglected so far, and then just blatant lies in trying to cover up the neglect, which is pretty much on par, I think, with the administration so far.
Yeah. And, you look at, okay, so why does Trump pick these fights, right? Like where do they come from? What's the motivation? Why does he decide that this is an area he wants to go? He has many things that obviously irritate him and piss him off. But one of the biggest obviously seems to be his perceived waste of money, right? Like anything that he perceives as a way, which is sort of bizarre because obviously he supports a lot of things that, you and I would sort of perceive as a waste of money. Right. But, there are things so you learn a lot about a person by, how they spend their money or how they view the spending of their money, whatever. And, this is sort of a window into him. Right. And so this constant criticism of Puerto Rico. I mean, even when the hurricane hit and the place was just like flattened, right? I mean, like flattened and flooding and everything else, he sort of blamed it on, I mean, really he talked about Puerto Rico like it was some third world country in a far off land, and it was like, you're talking about a U.S. territory, like we're responsible for that shit. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, obviously they have, a local government or whatever, but it's like, I mean, they're a territory. They are U.S. citizens. Like so it was just sort of bizarre from the beginning. And it really sort of fits in with his sort of larger worldview that, if you're not white, basically, you are sort of second class and substandard, and the things that you make and do are substandard, and the countries are substandard. And, the report about him calling, African countries, shitholes and all that stuff. That stuff, it sort of permeates the things that he says and the way that he thinks. And, so to say, not only to say that, Puerto Rico is a problem, but to sort of like vastly inflate the lie. And the Washington Post fact checker I was just looking at said that really $11 billion had been spent so far.
Okay, so there's a little off.
Yeah. Yes, there's a plan for, a lot more than that, about 5 times more than that, to as far as like outlays go, like money that's already been allocated that is going to be spent. So, yeah, but it's nowhere near, 91 billion. But, I mean, Trump sees people as, either him or others. Right. And, when California had the wildfires, he treated that very differently than he treated the tornadoes in Alabama or the hurricane in Texas. So,
I mean, not to be too brass, but like California wildfires, was a lot of like very wealthy people losing their homes.
Yeah.
So it was more people he could relate to. So
Yeah, but even that though, I mean,
that,
he sort of went, well, they're having these wildfires because they've totally screwed up the forest management. It's like
well,
he,
yeah,
he like went after California when they're in the midst of this disaster. Um, he tends to go after vulnerable people that he senses do not support him or are not worth his thoughts or affection or whatever. And non-white people certainly fit into that. Certainly fit into that paradigm. And then people politically not aligned with him also fit in, and that's frustrating from a president. The idea that some people are worth more than others in our country is sort of like maddening to me.
yeah, and it's of course it's just you see the kind of the I believe it was something like Women's Equal Pay Day or something around that nature. You just see the attitudes around that. There's just like a group of predominantly males who believe that this gender pay gap is something that doesn't exist. And it's like, but I mean, this is easily proven through statistics, and but like you see stuff like that where if it's not a supporter of his, then he doesn't care. But let me we'll transition out of that with just one more like just crazy thing he says. He for Washington Post reports for the third time has said that his dad was born in Germany, and his dad was born in New York. So he does this thing where he lies about things that are so unnecessary and so weird, and it's just like why do you do that? Like his mom was an immigrant, but his dad wasn't. Maybe he's getting it confused. I'm just like, but he's obviously been corrected the previous two times he said this, so I don't understand why he keeps saying it. It's like that this is like this that's just sometimes it make me think he just like lies so naturally and so easily that it doesn't even matter to him what he is saying, like the if it's factual or not. Like he's just gonna say if it's gonna if he wants to say he aligns with immigrants in some way because his dad was born in Germany when his dad was born in New York. But it's very weird. He's such a strange and bad person, and I just we'll get into this more in the next year, but hopefully hopefully that we're more than halfway through this.
Yeah, that's the hope.
But yeah, so pop culture. We talked about March Madness. That was pop culture, right?
That's pretty pop culture.
What about your kids? Any kids do anything fun this week?
I've been really bad at trying to take mental notes of when my kids do a thing. Let's see. Oh, this is bad podcasting right here. I don't know. Do you have a thing while I'm thinking?
So I obviously my song up top, I parodied the Backstreet Boys song "Everybody, Backstreet's Back." So the reason that came to mind, I'd totally forgotten to prepare a song, but I was sitting here waiting to start the podcast, and that came to mind because Beatrix has kind of like, as of to like maybe today, really mastered the K sound, the K sound, because today I noticed like she brings you a book, and before she like buh buh buh, but today she was saying book. And before, when she would try to say the K sound, it'd be like, because she like tried to, she sees cars and trucks, and she's kind of combined the word, so it's like it's like a cock or a cuck, which neither of those words is good. But before she was going, she couldn't say C's, and she couldn't say the K's, obviously the same sound. So she would be like, so she would replace C's with D's, and so she'd be like, duh, and that's what she would call when she see a car or a truck. She would go duh. But today she was going cuck, cuck. And so we're thinking like, what's other words we can say with like K and that end in K? And there's actually not that many that are. So we were talking about back because she's like she's realized she can walk backwards. And so she's been doing that a lot. And so we were saying back to her and she would say it back. And so it was like, so I just went, we call her, and it's not in this room, so it's not going to hear me, but we call the Alexa, we call it, the wake up word can be computer in reference to Star Trek, and we're fucking nerds. So
that's right.
Ours is computer, which has changed the way I reference my laptop. It's my laptop now. It's not my computer anymore. Because although it wakes up to some random sounds, it's listening to other things. But whatever. But anyway, so I just go, computer, play Backstreet's Back by Backstreet Boys, and it plays that, and she just all excited. And so literally maybe half an hour before we got on this podcast, I had listened to that song, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna put this into a song. And so Defense is Back. So yeah, this is the song up top is definitely inspired by my daughter. She's going through, according to the books, she's going through a rapid development phase, and which means she's very grouchy. She gets frustrated with her toys when they don't do what she wants now. So she'll be crying and whining at me, and I'm not sure why. I'm like, before it was, are you hungry? Do you need your diaper changed?
Yeah.
Like, is mostly the two things.
Or are you tired?
Or are you tired?
Yeah.
But now it's like, I'm mad at these toys. They are not doing what I want them to do. Like she has these this little thing called a beat bell or beat bow. It's then it plays music and you can interact with it and stuff. It's like this weird like electronic toy, and it's kind of broken. I don't know what happened. I think the batteries might be dying. So it would be in the middle of what it was saying, and then it would just cut off. Like she'd hit one of the buttons, it would start saying, and then would just cut off. And she knew that it was doing that because she's played with it before. And she was getting really mad. And she was like screaming at the thing, and she was turning and looking at me for help. And I'm like, I don't know. And luckily we have this other like mat that has the same sort of character in the middle, just like a smaller version. And so I just brought that out, and I was like, here, play with this one. It's the same. And she was happier about it, you know, but she's getting frustrated about things, which is like that. Now you're like, I can't make you happy now because I'm sorry that she like, if she can't, she's got like the shapes going into the shape type of thing. She's got this like picnic basket with like a star, a triangle, and a circle and a square. And if she doesn't get it in the right one the first try, she gets really mad, and like she's just like, she won't do anything. Like, and if you don't do something exactly how she wants it, she throws a fit for like a minute and then comes back, and then like I'm feeding her a string cheese, and I didn't like give her another bite fast enough, or it was a banana. She eats a banana every morning. She wakes up saying nana nana nana, like she wants her banana in the morning, and so you're feeding it to her. And I didn't give her the next bite fast enough. So she threw a fit. She wanted down. She rolled around on the ground for a bit. And then like finally comes over to me, asks to get up. I give her a bite. Everything's fine. And nothing was ever wrong in the first place. What are you talking about, Dad? Like she's in a really fun time right now. Definitely starting. She's 16 months. She's leaning into those terrible twos early, I think, but
you know, that's a sign of brilliance, right? You know.
Yeah, but she's still a sweetheart. Like, you know, when she's not around us, of course. You know, I took her. There's like the YMCA as the daycare.
Yeah.
And there's like she is happy most of the time, and you've been around her, Jeff. You know she is.
Oh yeah.
But you know, all day she was fussing over this and that with me. And then I pick her up from the daycare after I work out, and they're like, she's so happy and she's so talkative. And I'm like, it's like she's already figured out that she can be. We all figured eventually that we can be shittier around our family. And she's already figured that out.
No, this is like, oh my, like when you tell these stories, it cracks me up so much because it reminds me so much of when my kids were little. And it's the same thing. Like people will say to us, and my kids are great. Like I'm not like trying to say my kids aren't great because my kids are fantastic, but it's like, when people babysit our kids or our teachers talk about our kids or what their teachers talk about our kids, whatever, like they'll say things, oh my gosh, I just love your kids. They're so polite and they're so this and and I'm like, the fuck is that at home? Like I never see that, not never, but it's like, they just sort of like, they're not necessarily polite with me and Sarah, and, they're not necessarily whatever. I mean, and they're still sweet or whatever, but it's like, they sort of figure out real quick, like, okay, this is how we behave with everybody else. And then this is the way we treat our parents. And it's like, it's just, it's pretty hilarious. Cracks me up.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're about on time here, probably a little over. But yeah, I think it's a good time to wrap it up. Thank you for listening. Again, we have a Twitter account at pod versus everyone on Twitter. Hit us up with questions, comments, whatever. I'd love questions. We have podcast versus everyone at gmail.com if you want to send us questions. If you don't want people to see them, like on Twitter, they can see them if you do that. If you don't like Twitter, which is fine, no one should be on Twitter.
I'm not on Twitter.
Well, he kind of is now, guys.
I kind of.
Jeff wrote some great stuff on the Kyle Smith hire so far this week, and we'll definitely have more out of that. Kook fan and spokesman for spring ball coverage.
yeah. Go over there if you want some of that.
Yeah, because you can come see our recaps of the recap if you want. But yeah, like we rip on Kook fan, but they got boots on the ground and they got people there and they're covering spring ball and they covered the Kyle Smith hire and everything. So
yeah,
they have value and we appreciate
absolutely.
them.
And if I can just sort of like, I know there's probably like 3 people listening at this point, but like I just want to set the record straight on this. I am a Kook fan subscriber. Okay, so I mean I pay for that, and I do that because they fill a really important role in sort of like this whole, universe of coverage around our school, which to be honest is really sparse, right? Like there are just not that many people who cover the school with any regularity. And Kook fan in a lot of respects does a better job than the spokesman. Theo Lawson is one person. Kook fans got, a couple of students on the ground in Pullman. They've got, they're people who write about stuff, from hundreds of miles away, just like we do. They do an important thing. And so like, I don't, again, there's probably 3 people listening to this, but I just want to say like, what I wrote about, Kook fan and how they've portrayed things and different things like that with the basketball program. Look, man, I love Kook fan. We partnered with them on a fundraiser for Linsky's Hope. I consider Greg Witter, who's one of the founders of Kook fan, I consider him a friend. They do some good stuff. Doesn't mean we can't disagree once in a while, but they do some good stuff. So anyway, for what it's worth.
Also, we didn't gloat about it at all, which is really weird for us, but Gonzaga lost.
Yeah.
And we're happy with that, and also it means that Theo Lawson is back covering WSU.
That's right.
Because they had spokesman knows where they're making their money. No qualms with them. Obviously, that their Gonzaga coverage probably is the reason why they sell the majority of their subscriptions. But so obviously they had all hands on deck for the tournament, and very happy to see them exit the tournament just in time for Theo to come back and cover the Kyle Smith hire and cover the rest of spring ball. So welcome back, Theo. You're not listening, but that's okay.
Yep. That's all right.
But yeah, send us an email or also like, subscribe, all that. Please do it right now. You're listening on your phone. Just hit subscribe. It's cool. Give us 5 stars. Put a comment saying
we'd like that.
Yeah, I like to see the comments. We have some 5-star reviews, but only 2 of them have comments. So I'd love more because I have an ego. I want it to be fed. So please do that. But yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week.
That's right. Go Cougs.